The day you're put into a leadership role is not the day you become a leader. Get to be known as somebody who gets stuff done. Meet people, talk to people, and really spend your time building, expanding, and growing your network. If I'm doing something or saying something or standing up for something that I believe is right, I will die on that hill. Authenticity plays an enormous role in generating followership. You're going to have to lean on those relationships to find success. You got to pinch yourself every day and say, don't take it for granted.
Rob, hello.
Hello. Good to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this today.
My pleasure.
So, Rob, you're the CEO of KingSett Capital. I don't think KingSett needs too much of an introduction. One of the top Canadian private equity companies in Canada. You guys have, I think, about 18 million under asset management now.
Billion, but what's
oh my gosh, billion.
What's a B between friends?
No big deal.
Yeah, no big
billion.
deal. Yeah.
And you have been with the company for about 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
You started in the industry as an analyst,
Mm-hmm.
transitioned from president to CEO within the last year or so.
Just over a year ago, yeah.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about KingSett for those that maybe don't know.
Okay. KingSet's a private equity real estate investment business. So we raise large pools of capital from institutional and ultra high net worth investors. And we invest that money alongside our own capital into a variety of equity strategies and credit strategies right across all asset classes in all markets and in all parts of the capital stack across Canada. We're a Canada-only business, so everything we're doing is here. We're about 180 people, 3 offices. Lion's share of us are in Toronto, with 2 small offices in Vancouver and Montreal. So we cover the country that way. And as you pointed out, we've been around just over 20 years, founded in 2002. I started here in 2004. So the business has grown a lot over the years, but we've had a lot of fun, some successes, which has been great. Obviously, some challenges that we've had to work through. And it's been an amazing organization and adventure to be a part of.
Amazing. Obviously KingSett has grown so much from when it first started. What do you think is the biggest reason that KingSet's been so successful, and what differentiates you guys from some of the other players in the industry?
So when we think about our successes, and it's always important, I think, to highlight the fact that we don't come into the office every day thinking about our successes. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really important part of what makes up our DNA. And we really try to encourage people to remember that, despite the fact that we've had a successful track record, we have to come into the office every day and fight for the support, trust, and confidence of our stakeholders, mm-hmm. Our tenant customers, our investors, our service providers, our lenders, our borrowers, our joint venture partners, and so on. So a big part of what makes, I think, us successful is the hunger to drive for that each and every day. It's the humility that we have to keep front and center to make sure that we don't get complacent. Mm-hmm. And that's can be difficult, particularly when you're in a good market. Today's, as you would know, we have some challenges in the market today. But when you go through stretches, years, of tailwinds, where everyone looks really smart and everyone looks really successful, it's easy to get complacent. And, I always say that the streets are littered with hubris. Mm-hmm. And so that's the enemy of success, is hubris. So a lot of what I chalk our success up to is the fact that we have been, hopefully, at least, mostly been able to stay humble, stay hungry, and stay focused on those things that matter. The second thing, and I think this is probably, at a higher level, or more perhaps at a more tactical level, what makes us successful is the value of our relationships in the Canadian market. And many times people will ask, well, hasn't KingSett reached a scale where they've outgrown Canada? Or how much more is there for KingSett to do in Canada? Why aren't you in the US? Why haven't you gone to Europe like a lot of our competitors have done and have had success doing?
And do you get a lot of pushback from your investors?
We don't get pushback from our investors. I get questions about that from the other people in the market. Our investors, no pushback.
Yeah.
But other people in the market seem to think that it's a logical step for KingSett to make the move, to other geographies. And it comes back to what I believe and what generally we believe our key success factor and our key distinguishing, the key distinguishing element for us is in Canada, and that's really the value of our relationships. And if you went into the lobby of our office, you'd see our values up on the wall, and they sort of surround what we call our guiding North Star, which is the value of relationships, accountability, integrity, respect, sustainability, and so on, but all circling and really causing the foundation or creating the foundation for the value of relationships. We know everybody here, and that's a very powerful element for us. So we know all of the lenders, we know all of the developers and the joint venture partners and the sellers and the buyers, the brokers, obviously the advisors, the banks. We can make phone calls and meet very important people and go and see very important people, get insight, get intelligence, get information, really quickly, efficiently. That's very powerful. If we were to migrate into a different geography, say just pick the U.S. because it's easy, we lose all of that.
Yeah, for sure.
We lose that advantage. There may be other things that are going on. Obviously the United States, there's lots to do. It's very active. There's lots and lots of opportunities there, and lots of Canadians have had lots of success in the U.S. But what we believe our key distinguishing factor is really the value of our relationships. And in the U.S., we don't know anybody.
Yeah.
And so that's a very difficult set of facts for operating in what is clearly, probably the most competitive, most sophisticated market in the world. So we fall back and we say, well, even with our scale and our size, we're going to have to find things here to do. And so what we've chosen to do is operate across all of the asset classes, in all the parts of the capital stack, both equity and credit, doing lots of different things. We're sort of agnostic to what we're doing here as long as it's real estate, but we have a relatively narrow geographic focus in that we stick to Canada. So that, between those two things, I'd say that's sort of the secret sauce to what we're all about.
Gotcha. So, obviously you guys, just based off that, you're core to Canada. I follow you pretty closely on LinkedIn and what you guys are putting out there. You've been very optimistic about Canada, just given everything that's going on right now. And I guess your role has changed too within the last 5 years. You went from president to CEO. It's a challenging time for everyone right now. With all the noise, it's hard to blank some of that out. Like, how do you stay still so optimistic? And is there something that you guys feel you see that others don't see right now? And I'm also just curious too, because this is sort of, I guess, with you being in this leadership role, the first time that you're really maybe kind of going through a cycle like this as leading KingSett. So yeah, what's keeping you up at night? Where are you just trying to push everyone forward?
So there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
Look.
Sorry to throw it all at you.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm a born optimist, so let's start there. I always my inclination is to assume things will work out.
Yeah.
Okay. So I start with that, and not that I'm blind to risk, because quite the contrary. I think we spend a lot of time here focused on risk. But I think my bias is market forces will generally even things out over time.
Yeah.
And I think that's proven itself out time and time again over the generations. So I'm less focused on what the narrow negative sentiment is at any given point in the cycle. This is my first. As a leader, this is perhaps the most challenging times we've had. I've been in this business now almost 30 years. I've seen a few, perhaps not as dramatic the cycles that some of the older people in this business have seen, but I have seen some things, so I'm not completely new to it. We went through COVID, we went through sort of the global financial crisis in 08, 09. That was probably the scariest time in my professional career, because Now, Canada remained relatively unscathed, but at least as an observer as to what was happening in the rest of the world,
What
particularly in the
happened,
U.S.,
yeah.
it was a very scary time. That was, when people were calling their bankers and asking if they should take all their money out of the bank and just sit in cash, literally in a suitcase under their bed, because they thought the banks would run out of money.
Yeah.
Companies were drawing down on their operating lines because they didn't know if they called tomorrow if the bank would have the money to give it to them. That was a completely, that was panic. That was like real panic. Short-lived, but very dramatic.
Yeah.
Very difficult time. Now, then we go through, 14, 15, which was a little tough. COVID, obviously the onset of COVID in 2020, 2021, very, very difficult, particularly in real estate where certain asset classes, namely office, but also retail, went through cycles where people put into question whether or not anyone would come back to the office again. Would people ever go to a shopping mall again?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like a long time ago, but those were the questions. Those were existential threats
Yeah.
to many of our assets, and really at the end of the day, existential threat to KingSet's business.
Yeah.
And so we've been through that. Now, I wasn't leading the business at that time. I was working alongside John, and just for clarity, John's still very much around, as you know. And while I have the title of CEO, I also have the privilege and the benefit of having him at my fingertips, to lean on to seek counsel from. So there's lots of resources here. In addition, obviously, the management committee and so on, my partners. There's lots of resources here to lean on. I'm not out on an island here, carrying a flag with everyone following me. I just want to make that clear.
Yeah.
So I have seen some of this adversity before. And I think the themes, what I've learned over the years is that the themes are generally the same. The themes of leadership are generally the same. One, cut out the noise.
Mm-hmm.
So, with our smartphones and our multiple monitors where you can work on your email, you can work on your spreadsheet, and you can have Bloomberg open all at the same time, all day, flashing stories at you. It can become very stressful if you're focused on the Bloomberg terminal and if you're focused on your smartphone.
Yeah.
So I think the first rule is stop reading the news every minute of every day. Be informed, be curious, read about the things that are important to you and your business and your family and your country and so on. But don't get swept up in the minute-to-minute and hour-to-hour volatility and drama of what's going on in the universe, because it will swamp you and it will overcome you, and it will lead to knee-jerk reactions and decision-making that I don't think is effective over the long term. So that's rule number one, cut out the noise. The second thing is, focus on what you can control. So focus for companies like KingSet, for property owners, focus on all the stuff that matters that you have full control over. Call your customers. If you're in the leasing business, call your tenants. Mm-hmm. If you're in the property management business, focus on your buildings. What do you have to do to your buildings to make them attractive and compelling places for your customers to be?
Yeah.
If you are in, if you're raising capital, call your investors. If you're raising debt capital, call your lenders. If you're in the lending business, call your borrowers. Focus on all of your touch points, your service providers. Figure out what is causing them anxiety.
Yeah.
Figure out how you can serve their interests better. And focus on those kinds of things, because ultimately those are the things you can control. And that's where, that's what will drive your success over the long term. So that's the second thing. And I think the third thing, specifically as a leader or as part of a leadership team, the best thing to do right now is to set the priorities of the business so that people that work within your business understand what they have to focus on. So set the priorities, set the strategy, make sure the proper people and proper resources are put in place to tackle those challenges, and then march everybody forward and do what you can to facilitate their success. So, for example, it might be you as CEO, you might go spend time with the banks, making sure that they're understanding what you're doing in your business. And that will help you, that will help the people who are putting mortgages on your buildings. If you're in the development business, maybe as CEO, you spend some time with politicians or some bureaucrats or some people who are in planning, or maybe you spend time with people who have interests in your business, not monetary interests, but business interests.
No, for sure.
And so that they understand what your strategy is, how to stay calm, how you're managing risk, what your people are doing, to help facilitate the success of all of the other people in your business in what they're doing day to day, hour to hour. And I think if you can do those three things well, you're going to find your way through a challenging time. It doesn't last, nothing lasts forever, right? There's always a recovery. There's always a period of calm that follows, a period of volatility.
Yeah. So just kind of talking about kind of some of the changes that are happening right now. So you're pretty vocal on LinkedIn. I know you kind of made a post with the tariffs going back and forth, like get everyone in a room, sit and talk. And I think even just with like some of the new policies that are coming out with Liberals potentially getting into development or as a whole, I'm curious where you see, so if you could sit both parties down in a room right now and you kind of had to give them like your 60-second pitch on this is what needs to happen and this is going to get things actually across the finish line and start moving things forward so that Canada can really start honing in on growing again. What is that 60-second pitch? What do you think really needs to actually happen? And do you think it'll happen?
Yeah. So in summary, I think what I think needs to happen, broadly speaking, is the government needs to get out of the way.
Yeah.
And that's for Canada. I mean, it needs to get out of the way in a lot of places, but Canada specifically, I think broadly speaking, the message would be get out of the way.
And is that like, do you think? And I know that's what everyone's saying.
Let me explain what I think that means, because I think it means different things for different parts of the economy. The energy sector. First of all, we need a growth agenda that involves energy. It involves natural resources in this country. And so, for a decade, we've had government deliberately and quite strategically stifling growth of our energy business. Just completely ignoring the fact that if you're going to have our economy grow, energy has to be an important part of that. So the first, insofar as energy is concerned, get out of the way. Let energy do its thing. Let the oil companies get the energy out of the ground. Let the pipeline companies build the pipelines so that we can diversify our trade interests, so we can become less vulnerable and less beholden to what's going on in the United States and what their policies are. If you're talking about housing, again, get out of the way. Deregulate, cut fees and taxes, make it easier for developers to get permits and get the go-ahead to build things. Don't get in the business of building homes because that to me is getting more in the way. Okay, so cut that. Cut the bureaucracy. Cut the, just get out of the way of private industry. Set the conditions to facilitate the success, what the government can do and what they should be doing and frankly, what we need them to do and what they could be very good at is coming up with the policies needed to encourage and facilitate the success of private industry. Immigration reform. Let's get the right people. Let's get lots of people coming to drive the economy, but make sure they're the right people. And let's make sure that as they come into the country, we are creating the infrastructure needed to house them, provide them healthcare, provide them education, provide them skills and trades, all the right things that we need to give them to succeed. Instead of having them come here and drive Ubers. When they're otherwise qualified and smart enough to do other things. And we need other things. So that's immigration reform. Have a tax strategy, that encourages capital reinvestment. Cut income taxes to get smart people to move here. Cut capital gains taxes. I mean, we've waived the GST already or both parties have said they're going to waive the GST on homes, which is great, which is a great start. Defer development charges or cut development charges. Expand the federal government balance sheet for CMHC financing to encourage, development of new homes and development of apartment buildings. Cut rent control. I mean, get rid of the rent control regulations. I mean, all the regulation, taxes, permits, fees, time, controls, all of these kinds of things at the end of the day stifle private enterprise, private investment, and private economic growth. And we've had 10 years of it, and it's proven itself to be a disaster. You don't have to take my word for it. You just look at the data. This is not me expressing an opinion. This is me reflecting on the facts and saying it doesn't work. So it comes back to why am I optimistic? I'm optimistic because there's so many things within our control. Interprovincial trade, I didn't even get into that. Interprovincial trade barriers.
Yeah.
So there's all of these things that we could be doing that are all within our control to unleash the potential of Canada. And the fact is that Canada has in abundance so much of what the world wants and needs to flourish. We could be the best place in the world to do business with and do business in, if we could just figure out how to get out of our own way. So I am optimistic that ultimately, as I started with, market forces will dictate. I am optimistic that over time, our political leaders will come to their senses and allow some of this stuff to happen. I'm encouraged by the fact that my political inclinations are not secret. I mean, but even ignoring who you support, whether it's the Conservative Party or the Liberal Party or anybody else, I'm encouraged by the fact that we have two people running for Prime Minister who I think are smart.
Yeah.
You may agree or disagree with policy, which everyone's entitled to do. But I'm encouraged by the fact that I think we have two smart candidates running. And regardless of who wins, I think we'll be able to recognize what the market forces are dictating and what is required to have a pro-growth, to develop a pro-growth agenda in this country. And ultimately, I believe that the next 10 years in Canada are going to be much better than the last 10 years in Canada.
Let's hope. Most of my career has been in the last 10 years.
Yeah,
and,
well, let's hope.
Yeah,
let's hope.
it can. I mean, I'm with you. I'm a positive person as well, but it can be draining after, especially the last 5 years.
Look, it can be remarkably draining. And I
Yeah.
think, if you talk to people in real estate, which has had a pretty tough go over the last number of years, I think people are feeling drained. I think people are feeling beat up. And it's tough. And so it goes back again, to leadership. Part of leadership's responsibility is to make people remember why we're here.
Yeah.
And why there's reason for optimism. Look, we come to work every day because we have investors and stakeholders who entrust with us lots of their money. And we run a very important investment vehicle for them. And their constituents in many cases, either whether it's their family members or their pensioners or whatever. There's people who are relying on us every day to make good decisions, to work hard, to make good decisions, thoughtful decisions. Will we make mistakes? Of course we will. But it's to synthesize everything that's going on in the world and do our very best each and every day to drive results for them. And I'm quite proud of when I look around this company. And frankly, I would say, on balance, industry-wide, I'm quite proud of the fact that, everyone seems to be doing that despite, being kicked in the teeth many days a week for the last number of years. It's been a tough go. There's no question about it. But again, we're optimistic. I'm encouraged by what's happening or unfolding in the political front. There's a lot of noise going on, so cut out the noise. And let's focus on all the things, on all the touch points we have that we can control and make the best of it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
So my podcast is a little different than maybe some of the ones that you've been on before. I've had some really great mentors in my life, and I find that that's where I've kind of had some of my biggest growth experiences. And so I kind of want to get away from the real estate side of it and kind of just focus on sort of your journey a bit. Part of even why I did this podcast, I do this thing every year where I try to do one thing a year that pushes me out of my comfort zone.
Okay.
So this year's the podcast.
Excellent.
Last year I did stand-up comedy.
Oh, wow.
Which I know that you did. I actually didn't realize that you had done that charity.
So did you do Humor Me or something else?
No. So I did, my boss was trying to get people to do things that would help them on the sales side of things.
Right.
And so she offered for us to go to Second City.
Amazing.
So I did. I didn't know that you had to do a 5-minute skit at the end of it.
Okay.
So I signed up on a Wednesday and I started it on a Sunday. And then, I did a couple classes and then had to do a 5-minute skit.
Good for you.
Which was so scary.
So you took a course, you did a crash course on comedy.
I would say I only ended up going to 2 of them.
Okay.
And then just kind of did the rest. But a lot of the jokes were living in my head for a bit.
Right.
It was funny. I'm a bit of a queen of procrastination. So the skit was on a Monday, and I actually sat down to like write it all down on the
Wow.
Sunday.
Wow, that's pretty
Finished it
good.
at like 1 in the morning and then
That's
went
pretty
out.
good.
But it went really well. But I find those are some of the things that like have really kind of got me to even where I have been in my career. And I'm curious how that comedy humor me experience went. Like, was that something easy for you, or do you like do you push
So,
yourself out of your
so
comfort
do I
zone?
push myself? I feel like every day I'm pushing myself. I don't necessarily chart that course every day,
Yeah.
but I'm just reflecting back. I mean, look, one thing John has been amazing at for me is constantly pushing me out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what just KingSet, broadly speaking, tries to do with a lot of our people. I mean, we're trying to push people out of their comfort zone. I think that's great for people's development.
Yeah.
I think people enjoy being pushed, whether they admit it or not. I think people want to be pushed. I think it keeps people engaged and wanting to do better, and keeping them interested. And those are amazing things to try to do as you lead an organization. So, just broadly speaking, I think that's sort of part of the secret sauce here. The humor me was not that. I mean, the stand-up comedy, like, yeah, it was interesting because it was out of my comfort zone. Was it difficult? Not really.
Mm.
If you knew me better, and those who know me well understand, like, I have no problem standing up in front of people and performing or making it, like,
I
I
can
sort of
imagine. Yeah.
embrace it. I mean, that's, like,
I'm like that too.
I'm
Yeah.
not, I'm sort of, part of me is proud of it. Part of me is like, I'm a bit of a caricature of myself. So
Yeah.
so getting up and talking in front of people is not a challenge for me. That's sort of like you give me a microphone, like, I'm there. Um, Writing the jokes was very difficult. That was totally out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time. It was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. The performance was lots and lots of fun, and I've told lots of people afterwards that if you ever have the chance to do something like that,
Yeah.
you should do it.
Yeah.
But insofar as work is concerned, yeah, like, I find, as I've taken on more leadership roles over the years, that's pushed me out of my comfort zone. Like, my background in this business has been on the investment side, where day to day I'm negotiating. I was doing underwriting and then negotiating transactions, and I love that kind of stuff. I love the deal part of the business. That's always been where I've spent my time. It's a lot different when you're leading a business. That's the whole concept of leading the business is out of my comfort zone. So I almost feel like I come to work every day a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's and leadership is something that doesn't happen overnight. And I've said before to others, the day you're put into a leadership role is not the day you become a leader. Often you become a leader many, many days, months, years after that, right? It's a skill set that evolves over time. I'm very far from perfect at it. I've got a lot of things I need to work on. People tell me that all the time, so I get a lot of feedback, which is great,
Yeah.
and I need it.
Constructive
Yeah,
criticism.
a lot of constructive criticism.
Yeah.
But that's part of what makes the job enjoyable for me.
Yeah.
Is that there's so much to learn, and it's people will give you feedback. You'll say something either in a meeting or in front of your team, or in a podcast, or you'll post something on LinkedIn. And people will reflect on it and come back to you and say, like, did you mean this, or is this what you meant? And you'll realize you offended somebody, or you rubbed somebody the wrong way, or it didn't come off the way you thought. I mean, just the communication aspect of leadership needs work. It needs thought. It needs, you evolve in that. Then, how you carry yourself, whether how you make decisions, how you counsel and take advice from others, how you report difficult news to employees, investors, boards, and so on. All those things take leadership, and they take a long time to figure out how to do. Now, again, having John around to help me through those things has been amazing. It's made, even though I'm not perfect at it, it's made at least my ability to deliver that kind of stuff way easier. Still lots of work to do, but you always have to lean on people who have been through it before, had longer times to evolve and perfect it, and then hopefully, extract what you love and maybe discard things that aren't your style or that you don't think are as effective,
sure.
and come up with your own style and ultimately be your own leader.
So that's like an interesting Well, actually, it's perfect timing to kind of the transition that I wanted to go into. So you've been with KingSet for 20 years. You've obviously been around John and seen how John has operated. So did you always know that you wanted to kind of go the route of getting into leadership and kind of rising to become a CEO here?
No, not really at all. I mean, when I started here, if you had asked me, so just to take a few steps back, and not to go too long into it, but
No,
you know,
go for it.
I spent
Yeah.
a couple of years at a development company, a company called North American Development Group. They're still around, partners of ours, great people. Where I worked for a few years there. That was my first sort of real job out of
Yeah.
school. From there, I went to Reacan, spent 4 years, just under 4 years at Reacan, again as an investment analyst. Then I came here as an investment analyst. If you had asked me when I landed here how long I would have been here, I probably would have told you 3-4 years. I was coming off of a 3-year, 4-year stint at Reacan that felt like an eternity. I was in my 20s at the time.
Yeah.
You know, it felt like a very long period of time. I was at North American before that for a couple of years. I probably would have said to you, you know what, give me 3 or 4 years and then I'll probably be out of here. My original career aspiration was always to start my own development business.
Oh, interesting. I was
So
going to ask you if
it
you
was to
thought
be an
that. Yeah.
entrepreneur. That was like, if you had asked me in business school where I thought I would go, my goal was to be an entrepreneur. And I think I still have a lot of that in me. I'm still here over 20 years later because John has done a remarkable job at providing, you know, satiating that appetite for me over that period of time. And so part of that goes back to pushing me out of my comfort zone,
Yeah.
giving me increasingly, you know, senior roles and leadership roles. Having some success obviously never hurts. The business has changed, grown, become broader, more complex. So that's also been a big part. It's always been interesting to be here. We're always doing new things, which has been a huge learning experience for me. John's been an amazing mentor and partner, and I've had the good fortune of working for some other great people as well.
Yeah.
You know, John Preston, Rob Green at North American, who are still around, terrific people. Ed Sunshine and Fred Wax at
Yeah.
Reacan, terrific people. So I've had the privilege of working with amazing people. John obviously is going to be the central figure of all that because I've been with him for
Yeah,
so
for
long.
so long. Yeah.
But he's done an amazing job at keeping me interested. And ultimately, KingSet, my role at KingSet and KingSet itself today feels like my own business. It's not my own business. I obviously have partners,
Yeah.
and John being, again, the central figure of that. But I've satiated, you know, that hunger of being an entrepreneur through my experience at KingSet. And in large part, I owe John, you know, I owe thanks to John for providing that to me. So it's been an amazing experience here. And I no longer feel the need to go out. You know, and it's been many years since I felt
Yeah.
that need. But I no longer feel the need or the desire to go and start my own business because I sort of look at KingSet and say, like, this is sort of my business.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
you're right. And I've been hopefully, you know, a meaningful part of its success, and hopefully even a more meaningful part of the success that we hope to have going forward. And so that has been, at the end of the day, I'm going to look back on, at some point, I'll look back on my career, you know, many years from now, hopefully, and I'll look at KingSet and I'll say, like, I was sort of a big part of that. And I'm going to be hopefully very proud of whatever it is that is.
Yeah.
And that's sort of how. So when you ask me, did I ever think I would be CEO of a, you know, what is, I guess, a large real estate company here in Canada? Like, no, I never really wanted to be that. I found myself here out of a series of fortuitous experiences, and it's been an amazing ride.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, lots of gratitude.
So I'm curious because obviously John is very iconic. Everyone knows John. Stepping into the CEO role, which he had for so long, very admirable, but also I'm sure that there's a lot of people watching, and I can imagine at some point might have been intimidating for you. Maybe not. I'm curious on that. But the way that John's run the company, how do you feel? Like, do you feel that you have to kind of run it the exact same way? And you'd mentioned that you're still kind of figuring out leadership, and leadership isn't something that you just step into. So, like, what would you say is either your leadership that is similar to John's, differentiating from John's? Are you still kind of figuring that out?
Yeah,
and is there
so-
pressure to kind of stay status quo or to kind of make this your own?
So I wouldn't use the word intimidating. I don't really get intimidated. Intimidating is not really part of my existence, to be
Fair.
frank, and I don't say that to seem overconfident, but I don't get intimidated. Like
Yeah.
that's not the word I would use to describe it.
When
Is
you've
it?
also worked with him for so long
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, am I a little anxious? Yeah, I would say there's there's always some anxiety there. I don't want to fail. I don't want obviously I want to have success here. I want the business and the people here to have success. I want to provide the investors with what they're looking for. So there's lots of pressure to do that, and I think there's a level of stress and a level of anxiety that just comes with the territory. And I more embrace it. It's sort of what gets me excited every day.
Yeah.
So it's not intimidation. John has never created the pressure on me to be John. John doesn't want me to be John.
Yeah.
There's some parts that there's some parts that I observe about John's leadership, many parts that are incredible and that I love and that come naturally to me. There's some parts of John's leadership that are very different than mine. And I have to be at the end of the day, I think what people gravitate to, leaders that people really gravitate to, are leaders that are authentic.
Yeah.
And authenticity plays an enormous role in generating followership. So the ability of getting others to follow your lead largely depends on authenticity. If people don't think you're being authentic with them, they largely ignore what you're telling them. So I'm my own leader. I'm my own style. What you see as we're talking here, what my team sees when I'm speaking in front of them or we're in a meeting, what our investors see when I'm in a board meeting, that's me. Like what you see from my posts on
Well, I'll say,
LinkedIn.
like you're very much in the public arena. And
That's just
it's
me.
Very consistent across the board.
It's pretty consistent. It's not perfect. There's lots of mistakes I make. There's lots of times I put something out there and someone will tell me that I could have said it a different way. John gives me lots of feedback. Like on ways to deliver certain messages or certain decisions that are made to do certain things, certain strategic decisions and so on. I reflect on those. Often I'll make changes. Sometimes I don't. I've always been given the liberty of sort of running my own self and running my own brand.
Yeah.
And my brand, I think, is very different than John's brand. John casts a long shadow. John knows he casts a long shadow. Is he iconic in Canadian real estate? For sure he is. Are there people who will always compare me to John? Probably. But at the end of the day, I don't really care.
Yeah.
I'm going to run it. I'm going to run things the way I think I will be most effective. I've got an amazing team who are right here beside me, helping me lead, whose views, opinions I draw on all the time, and we tend to draw on each other's opinions. I think it's very collaborative. At least that's my view.
Oh yeah, no, for sure.
And that's really the key to success. Like, my view is that more smart people around a table make better decisions than one smart person around a table.
Yeah.
So we're constantly drawing on each other's views. John gives input when we seek it, for sure, but also he'll offer input even unsolicited, as he should. And I just hope that, over time, I can create sort of the same. Iconic's not the right word, but I hope that over time I can create and generate the same followership that he's been able to generate. I mean, if I can do that, we're off to the races. But that I have to do ultimately I have to do that in my own style that's authentic to me.
Yeah. I'm curious because obviously you've been here for 20 years. I think a lot of people that are at KingSet have been here for quite a while too. My opinion is some of the top talent in real estate is at KingSet.
That's very kind.
And they've stayed. Has it been an interesting transition at all, being peers and then kind of moving up the scale into leadership with these people that you've been working with for years, or has that not really come into effect at all?
I don't think I approach it like, we were peers. Now I'm your boss, and now I'm the leader, and you're going to do what I say. That's not my approach. First of all, I don't think that leads to success. So
for sure.
We'll start with that. Second, I don't think it's effective leadership style. That's second. And third, it's just not my style. It's just not. That's not the way I would approach things. So there are people who were my peers who now, in a technical sense, report to me. But as I said earlier, the style here, the environment here is one of I'd like to think is one of collaboration. I'd like to think most people agree with me on that. I look at, I'll just take an example. I mean, I look at a guy like Scott Coates. Scott Coates runs our debt business.
Yeah.
Scott Coates has been with KingSet since 2006. We hired him, John hired him in 2006 to start the debt business. In 2010, when I became basically head of investments, or co-head of investments at the time, but leading ultimately into CIO, in a very technical sense, Scott started reporting to me. Okay, so John had given me sort of purview of all investments, credit and equity. So in a very technical sense, Scott was reporting to me, and I had oversight of the debt business. The fact is, Scott is an expert lender. Scott's the best lending guy, as far as I'm concerned, the best real estate lending guy in the country, who has decades of experience, more than I do, in lending on real estate. I never viewed Scott to be a subordinate of mine. I've always viewed that relationship, and even today I view that relationship as being, Scott runs the debt business. I'm here to provide, to provide an opportunity to be a sounding board, to watch what's going on, to provide some alternative perspective. I bring an equity perspective to the credit side of the business that I hope at times Scott feels is useful and effective. And together we run that business. And ultimately, in most cases, when there's a tough decision to make, I'll defer to his judgment.
Yeah.
Unless in certain cases maybe not, but
everyone
most of
seems
the time
to have like their own
he's the
autonomy
expert
to run. Yeah.
He's the expert.
Yeah, for sure.
I can't tell Scott how to run the debt business. Scott's the expert lender. I'm not the expert lender. And I think that's part of what leadership is about. It's about putting the right resources in the right seats, striking the right priorities, and making sure that we have the right agenda and the right strategy, but ultimately letting the right resources run their parts of the business. Bill Logar is another example. Yeah. Bill Logar is a property guy. He's an operating guy. He runs the asset management side of the business. So all of the property level development, property management, leasing, all the day-to-day operating plumbing of our portfolio. Bill's an expert in that.
Yeah,
Bill's a career operator. There's nothing I can tell Bill about running a property that he doesn't know. So my job is, again, offer a different perspective, watch what's going on. When I feel like there could be some other things to be considered, I'll offer that. But ultimately, it's to allow Bill to run that show. And I think, again, that's part of how we like to run the business. I have to empower Bill to run the assets because Bill's an asset guy. So that to me is what a CEO does. It's about prioritizing the agenda and putting the right people in the right chairs to carry out, the business.
So becoming a CEO, anyone that's listening that has aspirations of that, obviously I find that a lot of the younger people now, I don't even know if it's necessarily their fault, but even just the way that the workplace is working nowadays, some companies, I have some friends that work in tech that they don't even have an office to go to if they wanted to. And so the dynamic has changed. I'm curious your take on if you think that's if they're going to struggle to kind of get into leadership roles down the road, or like, what do you feel are the fundamentals that kind of need to be in place for anyone who wants to rise up to being a CEO to kind of follow, and what leadership would you give them? Advice would you give them?
That's a very difficult question. I mean, I think if you're a young person who's you're working in an industry that you love, or in a company that you love, that you get energized by, that you get, that you find engaging and challenging, and there's opportunities for growth, the thought of charting a course to CEO is ludicrous to me. Mm-hmm. That makes no sense. And it's not something I would advise someone to do. What I would advise young people to do is, in the early days of your career, there's sort of three rules. One, I said, put your hand up, show up, and speak up.
Yeah.
So that starts number one. So show up. Get to the office. Even if you're in a remote role and you have a company that operates sort of in a hybrid, find a way to congregate with other people, either in your business or in your industry, but show up somewhere, go somewhere. You got to be physically present somewhere with someone to really get ahead. So I'll start with that. Put your hand up. So if there's something that needs to get done, volunteer to do it. Get to be known as somebody who gets stuff done, who's resourceful, who's ambitious.
It really feels like that's lacking a ton these days too.
Well, you know, not our respectfully, our young people here are amazing. I mean, our young people here are like extraordinary. So my experience with young people at KingSet has been extraordinary. We have amazing young people. So put your hand up and get stuff done, and get to be known as someone who can get stuff done. I think that's important. And speak up. If you have a view, say something. Often I find young people sit in meetings as observers, and they're either intimidated, or they're shy, or they're timid, or they're unsure, insecure, whatever. But if you're in a meeting, assume that you're in the meeting because someone wants to hear your view.
Yeah, you definitely need to get over that.
You got to you have to get over that. You have to get out of your comfort zone and get over that. So speak up if you have a view. So that's the first rule. Second rule, define your core set of values. So either the company you work for will have a core set of values, and if those resonate with you, live those values. But define a core set of values that you find represent an authentic version of yourself, and live those core values. And again, it goes back to authenticity. If they don't reflect you, then don't use those. Use something else. So define what your values are, and live your life, as best you can according to those values. And the last part is relationships. Meet people, talk to people. And really spend your time in the early part of your career building, expanding, and growing your network. And ultimately, as your career grows and evolves, you're going to have to lean on those relationships to find success, and in tough times to fight adversity. And that, at the end of the day, is the currency of business, and that's the lifeblood of what we do here every day.
Just kind of last couple questions here. So obviously relationships are huge to real estate. Everyone talks about that. It's the core of it.
Mm-hmm.
Aside from John, because you've obviously learned a lot from him, is there one other specific person that you've learned a ton from, or a pivotal moment that's like really defined your career and like really kind of changed things for you?
Wow, that's a pretty. There have been so many moments along the way where people have demonstrated for me either leadership style, or adherence to values, or business, the way of running board. It's everything from the way people run board meetings and communicate with investors, to people who've taught me technical skill over the years.
Up, yeah.
I mean, is there one that stands out? Probably not one that stands out. I mean, I've had the privilege of working alongside amazing people, and not just people I've worked for, but people who have worked for me, and people that I've worked alongside. Right? I mean, I think of people like Colin Barelick, who's our chief investment officer, who has worked at my side basically since 2008. We hired him. He was a BMO investment banker, and we hired him to come here, and he's been, basically my wingmate for all of that time, and continues to be insofar as investments is concerned. And there's times where I lean on his skill and his intuition and his style, which is a completely different style than my style. And so like Scott Coates, again, I go back to the way he runs his debt business. John obviously is the ever-present and overarching influence. There's times where I'll lean on my wife, right? My wife, who runs one of the big law firms downtown, has been an incredible influence on so many parts of my style. And like if it wasn't for her, I would be completely different. Or like she often will knock me in the shoulder and say, you can't say stuff like that, or you have to approach it like this. I mean, she's got she's sort of like my built-in sensitivity chip, right? And there are other people in the office too, right?
Yeah.
I think of my partner Aliyah Muhammad, who's newish to the company, like she's been here 3-4 years. Again, totally different approach to leadership style than me, and will often, and she's got a very subtle way of sort of poking and prodding some of the style things that I do as a leader. Rachel Balchin, who runs our people and culture team, who often I think gets nervous about giving me critical feedback, but ultimately, you know, I try to reassure her I want her critical feedback. You know, she's been, and she hasn't been here that long either, but been, you know, a good influence on me. Anna Kennedy, our former CFO, who I worked with for years. You know, Anna Kennedy was an amazing woman who's been around a long time, super smart, super hardworking, and was a coach for me for years. And she was around with me as I was appointed president. So saw me migrate into that leadership role, and I'd have talks with her in her office about how we deal with certain issues, either decisions on finance or people issues, or, you know, like all those kinds of investor issues. I mean, she's a genius. You know, so there's lots of. Ed Sunshine gave me great advice many years ago. To get involved in philanthropy and community. And if you look to him and Fred Wax, who at the time was the chief operating officer of RIACAN, between the two of them, huge philanthropists, community leaders, very present in different parts of the community, and that motivated me to do stuff like that. So I've been influenced over the years by so many different kinds of people in different roles. Who have different relative roles to. It's been amazing, and look, like it's been incredible.
Yeah.
And I when I look back on my career and those people that I've worked for, with, and who have, you know, and so on alongside, I only wish others will have the benefit and the privilege and the honor of working with and alongside people of the same caliber, because I've had. You know, tremendous fortune, touch wood. Tremendous good fortune. And the key is not to take it for granted. So it's hard.
Of course. Yeah.
But you know, you gotta pinch yourself every day and say, don't take it for granted. You gotta fight for it every day.
Well, thanks for your time, Rob.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I want to do one little last thing with you, a little rapid fire.
Okay.
Okay. Coffee or wine?
Coffee.
Coffee. What's a pet
Wine's too caloric, so it would be wine. It would be wine.
If it was light wine.
Yeah, I mean, if we could find a good light wine, it might be wine.
Not
but I love wine.
Prosecco isn't that high in calories.
I love Prosecco. Yeah. I love wine. I tend to stick alcohol. I try to stick to just Saturday nights for alcohol. Otherwise, it's coffee.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing. What's a pet peeve of yours?
Timidity.
Timidity.
People who are timid.
Oh, timidity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like people. I tend to respect people who stand their ground. I enjoy confrontation, some might say. I love heated debate and getting into, not arguments, but getting, you know, challenging people's views and opinions and defending it and articulating my view and having others articulate their view to me. I sort of enjoy that. And I find people who are timid, you know, it sort of grinds at me a little bit.
What's a hill that you'll die on, either professionally or personally?
Oh my God, a hill that I would die on? Standing up for values. You know, like, there are times where I say things, do things, present myself in ways that people get offended. And my view is that because someone gets offended by something you say doesn't mean what you said is offensive. And if I'm doing something or saying something or standing up for something that I believe is right, I will die on that hill.
That's good. It's good to have that.
Mm-hmm. More people should have it.
What's your walk-up song?
What's a walk-up song?
Okay, so you're on a big arena.
Yeah.
You're about to be announced.
Yeah.
It's a big pump-up rally song.
Oh, man, probably Glory Days, Bruce Springsteen.
Okay.
Badlands, Bruce Springsteen. I mean, Rosalita, Bruce Springsteen. The old Springsteen stuff is what I would tend to gravitate to.
Okay. Yeah. What do you spend too much money on?
Suits.
Yeah, fair.
Suits. Fair. I wear good suits. That's where I indulge.
And what's a small moment that you'll never forget?
Small, I mean, there's, a small moment I will never forget.
Or big moment, just a moment that will be embedded in you forever.
I mean, they're all personal moments. I mean, the small, they're not even small, I guess, they're big personal moments. I mean, the day you get engaged, the day you get married, the day your kids arrive, you know, the day you drop your son off at university, all those moments. Those are what, that's what makes life life.
Amazing.
So, yeah.
Okay, well, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate
My
it.
pleasure. Always
Thanks,
my pleasure.
Rob.
Thank you.